Scott, I think in the past you told us that you have what you called, I think, a drop-down menu that every person in your company has. I think you called it sustainability goals, but maybe you could just describe that, because I think it really pushed it all the way everywhere, and I think that would be very helpful for people to hear about.
Yeah, just real quick. So 2021 is the first year where it's actually touching every employee in the company. We've been focused really around the executive level for quite some time, but now there is, to your point, there's two big things that have happened now. One is that if you're a bonus eligible employee, which is a large portion of our employee base is bonus eligible, which we call the AIM, so an annual bonus, and there are factors, and they're the typical factors, but now there's a new one around ESG. And that one's around emissions reductions. We keep everyone focused on the most material issue, which is emissions. It's emissions, not only our operations, but emissions with our products. And it's driving all the things you would expect. And number two is every employee in the company, from Mike to the brand new shop room production worker, there is a requirement. One of the required objectives is an ESG objective, and there's a drop-down menu. You can select from among a list of things that we are suggesting, or there's the opportunity for you to develop your own in working with your manager. And the great thing about that is we're able to quickly look across the organization, query those to see what people are focused on, who's overseeing it. We can check in with the progress. And that has been a full rollout this year. So I think that's a really big deal, and it's doing exactly what we thought would happen. Daily workshops, a hunger for more of how we connect all the dots internally. It gets you all the things you would expect to get when people are putting it on their objectives that they'll be evaluated against.
So one of the reasons I wanted to start off with Scott here is that I see them as a perfect example. Well, as near perfect as you can get, of a company that is and continues to fully integrate sustainability ESG / climate throughout the organization. So if we had a chart here of the companies in the universe that Trane competes with, you quickly figure out that the valuation on Trane is higher than the competitors, and that is because, in my opinion, that they get climate and ESG and they have fully integrated it into their program. And it's having big dividends, not only for society, but also for all stakeholders, including society. I bet Mike Eckert would have a question for Scott. Do you, Mike?
Yes, we see dozens and dozens of companies trying to develop reality and substance behind their promises to society about what they're going to do about climate. I was just teaching a class yesterday on TCFD, and the brick wall that TCFD is running into with regard to corporations and the law, that making forward statements about what the company's going to do has to be based and supported by substance. And so on the one hand, they're afraid of getting sued for not having a commitment to net zero by 2050. And they're just about to see a wave of suits about they're making commitments to net zero by 2050. And what backs that up? Is that misleading? So we're really in a very interesting period. And so my question on Trane is, do you sense these pressures, and how do you deal with it?
Well, I think it's a great point. We have been monitoring this really closely. We've been very careful. We've been very careful not to sign on to every commitment and pledge that comes towards us from all the outside organizations saying, please sign here. I think our culture is one that's much more, it's pragmatic in one sense. It's also around, do we believe what's possible, and do we see some pathways? We don't have to see the full pathway to achieving the commitments, but it's got to be more than what we're seeing right now, to your point around net zero. And so what we've done is that we've taken a science-based approach, and we've insisted that our targets be science-based and that they achieve the requirements of the science-based targets. That was both our previous targets that ended in 2019 Our latest ones we've just been validated in February with our latest targets are all science-based and meet the 1.5 degree criteria, which I think is really important. And because it shows that we are considerate and we're aligning our actions with something outside the company in the context, as Jack put it, to climate and climate impact. I think that's number one. And number two is when you have a product emissions footprint like we have, it's really difficult to figure out how do you calculate reductions in emissions for products that may last 20, 25 years when you leave them with a customer, and you might lose control. In the past, a company would not touch that. No one was even interested in talking about it. Mm-hmm. We were one of the first to say, we'll go after that. And it's been tough. And here's what we've done. We have worked with outside groups, but also internally. At last count, there was 210 people inside the company globally working on a way to calculate the reductions in our product emissions when we leave the project with the customer. And we're calculating it now down to the sub-zip code level, factoring in all of the you need to factor in. And doing that for a company our size that's in 1 out of every 2 buildings, commercial buildings, is easier than done. But we've had a team that's been working on how you do that, because I think, anticipated at some point down the road, I didn't think it would hit us this fast, that we would be asked, how do you back all of these claims up? How can you really prove your progress? And so we're at a point where I think by September of this year, we can pull back the curtain and we're ready to show everyone how we're calculating everything at the project level globally.
Sorry, Scott, one of the things in my sort of nonprofit world is I'm one of the co-chairs of Women Corporate Directors in Boston, and we recently held a discussion at one of our groups, and what we're talking about is we hear all the experts telling us what we should be doing, but we all got together in these small groups and reported out about what we're actually doing. And there's just tremendous confusion, especially in the mid-cap space of, okay, we're doing a lot of things internally, but how do we pivot and report them to shareholders? How do we organize them? And how do you really get people to focus on this? So, to give you an example, I'm on the board of ATN International, which provides telecommunication services. And during the pandemic, we worked with the Navajo Nation, which we serve in the Southwest, and we put in lots of hotspots so that all the children could really have schools, because it was a very limited area. And yet, this has never been disclosed except in a sort of press release locally. And we don't really know what we should be doing. I mean, they did actually put in their 10K, the breakdown of the social issues are easier, the how many women, how many people of color, et cetera. But the whole environment issue is something that is, for the smaller companies, is a real struggle. So I'm curious as to where you started your journey, because you're in a great spot now, but how did you actually get started doing this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it has an easy answer for me, though. Sustainability topics can be overwhelming to everyone, especially a management team that might not know what the word means or what you should be focused on, because that's always the question. There's 1,000 things to focus on, and they're all good things, and you can make a case for all 1,000. But at some point, somebody's got to help say, the 1,000 are good, but what's our 3 big ones? What are the big rocks? And so, there's words for that, materiality and all those things, but it's really around coming up with some way to have an objective way of getting everyone's head wrapped around these are the 3 or 4 big things we have to make some progress on. And what I have learned since that first milestone, because that was an eye-opener for me. I didn't know how big that was back when we first did it. The second thing was figuring out, where else then are you confused about what the gaps are? And one of ours was, how much is your board engaged? That was something that we have addressed as Trane Technologies. So over the last year, I worked directly with the board to point out that there seems to be some questions still about how engaged the board is. You seem to be engaged. You are engaged. I know that you're engaged, but you've not said formally what your engagement level is. And so our proxy statement is going to have a signed by the board ESG statement that talks about their clear oversight and their views, perspective as a board about what should be happening inside the company and what they're responsible for. I think that kind of thing helps out. I think renaming the governance and nominating committee, the sustainability governance and nominating committee helps people understand that if you're serious, you begin making some things. Sometimes it may seem like a renaming, or, you know, people have said, okay, it's not, what's the big deal that Trane has decided they're going to work with greenhouse gases as their number one issue? Well, to me, it was a really big deal because we could stop debating whether or not it was another thing. You know, we always say these are the big rocks we have to go move, and so that's helped us clarify to every stakeholder what we're working on.